Welcome to Eureka Street Crypto. This is my anti-professional crypto channel. I'm just a barely sane dude who fell down the cryptocurrency rabbit hole. This channel is my fumbling attempt to communicate myself outside my own head about my journey in the crypto space. It is basically my brain dump. None of this is actual financial advice. Good morning, everybody. I'm Eureka John, and you're at Eureka Street Crypto, broadcasting live on January 3rd, 2022 at 6:09 in the morning from Leander, Texas. And this is my morning video blog, aka morning brain dump, and just my time before I go on about to be a husband, a dad, a co-worker, to just get the crypto out of my system so I don't, and that's what I do. And this is my learning process, and this is my try to articulate the things that I learned from podcasts, from books, from magazines, from Twitter, outwardly, because you can learn something by taking it in, but that's a process. The other half of the learning process is expressing out of yourself. And one of the podcasts that I listen to quite a bit is Bitcoin Takeover Podcast. With me, special guest Vlad Costea. He's the creator of Bitcoin Takeover Podcast. I have him on. I've been following his work. He's a podcaster, he's a Bitcoiner, he's an entrepreneur, DIY get her done type. He's an author. He's a music lover, man, and he's a total curious mind, and I completely admire that. That's the type of person that I strive to be as well. And I wanted to have him on, and I saw that he's been getting some NFTs on Bitcoins. It just blew my mind when I first heard about it, and I read into it, and it's really cool. I wanted to have him on to talk himself. This is his unapologetically just talk about himself, because when you're podcasting and you're interviewing people, you don't really get a chance to talk about yourself. You listen to what everybody. Vlad, here's your time. Welcome to the show.
Hi, it's good to be here. For whatever reason, I'm not hearing you very well, but I hope that at least the broadcast is going, technically well. You're a bit laggy, and I can hear the audio with some delays. I was able to understand most of what you said, so I hope that you also understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay. So the reason why I got here is because you noticed on Twitter that I'm doing NFTs on Bitcoin. And this is pretty much a renaissance of Counterparty, which is a protocol that was created in January of 2014 by Bitcoiners who burned 2,100 BTC to create this protocol. Because this was a response to Mastercoin, which was the first ever ICO that was done on Bitcoin. Today, Mastercoin is known as OmniLayer, and OmniLayer is being used by Bitfinex to, manage and issue Tether. They have also extended this to Ethereum and to, what's the other one? I think Tron. So For the first time, this was one of the very Bitcoin ways of responding to an ICO. They said, we don't want people to invest capital into something expecting anything in return. This is not a security, and it should not be perceived as such. So instead of actually investing to make people buy tokens, we're going to make them burn their Bitcoins to an address that can never be generated. It's called one counterparty XXXXXXXXX. So they made it so that nobody can ever generate that in a million years if they tried. And they sent their Bitcoins there. There are more than 2,000 Bitcoins that have been burned to that address. And they received in return an amount of XCP tokens, which are native to the Counterparty network. But the interesting part about Counterparty is that you don't really need to use the XCP token. You can use it, for example, to create named assets. And this is something that's very unique to Bitcoin's Counterparty. because on Ethereum, when you create a token, an NFT, it's going to have the name of the cryptographic hash that generated it. But on Counterparty, you can actually put a name that you want, up to 14 characters, only letters, no numbers, no punctuation signs, just letters, up to 14 of them. And this is where, popular NFTs and memes got born, like the rare Pepes, like Spells of Genesis, Sarutobi, and lots of others that have become kind of like very collectible items because they were some of the first ones, and they precede CryptoPunks. They precede, what else is popular nowadays? ETH Rocks or whatever. They were,
Club.
yeah, they were some of the first ones that were created. And at the time, they were being exchanged by people, not necessarily to make money, just to have fun. And it was also a response to the Reddit censorship at the time. As you know, these social media platforms are moderated by humans who may get offended by some posts and create rules that others don't like. So as true Bitcoiners, they said, screw you and your rules. I'm going to put this on the Bitcoin blockchain so it exists forever. And I'm going to send it to all of my friends so that they keep it forever.
Nice. Yeah, you jumped straight into Counterparty and a lot about the history and a little bit of some of the technical side of it. So I want to back this up a little bit, and I want to hear first about your own journey and about how you got into Bitcoin and how you started with all that. You're from Romania. Are you there now?
Yes, I am. Even if it's not for OPSEC.
Okay. Yeah. And it fascinates me how a Romanian might perceive Bitcoin, might perceive libertarianism, might perceive NFTs versus an American. I grew up around Romanians. My dad owned a machine shop, a metal shop, and for making industrial products. And he hired a Romanian immigrant fleeing from communism during the Ceausescu regime. And from there, it just turned into a massive flood of tons of his friends and family and everybody else coming over to work in the shops. And I started working in the shop at the age of 12. And so basically, I was raised around Romanians. And I remember specifically on the day, and I believe it was 1987, when the communism fell and Ceausescu was taken out of power in Romania. And the entire shop just decided to close shop that day, and everybody celebrated, drank beer in the shop, and just stopped work. There was nothing that it was not a holiday in America. There was nothing that anybody could do but just stop work and celebrate that day. And so the whole idea of Bitcoin and somebody like you from Romania adopting that and your perception of it really fascinates me. So let's hear a little bit about that and about how you think that might have affected your perception on Bitcoin.
Yes. So I think I have told the story about how I got into Bitcoin and what I liked about it way too many times. And since you presented it in the context of being a Romanian and what it means, I think this is a lot more relevant to anyone listening, because a personal story doesn't mean much. But if you put it into a greater context, you're going to realize why something that sounds as crazy as using Bitcoin to store your wealth actually makes sense in parts of the world where inflation and confiscation are just out of the charts and are very common. And this goes back to the history of my family. So obviously, I did not know much about this when I got into Bitcoin. I've discovered most of it because I was interested in how my grandparents and parents handled their finances when they were my age. And that's how I found some extra legitimation for my belief. So we had this monarchy in the interwar period, which was very functional. We were, I think, one of the top 5 military powers in Europe between 1918 and 1930 something. So Romania actually meant something when it was a kingdom. But after we have joined the Second World War on the side of the Nazis and we basically lost, this was terrible for our country. And we ended up being part of the USSR side of redrawing the map of Europe. So we were not ever part of the USSR as a state, but we are under their political dominance. So after 1945, when the war had ended, the Soviets just came into the country and they confiscated all of the wealth. Basically, everything that was private property was considered to be perverse and against the goals of the regime. So in my case, I've had a grandfather who had a small business just operating, creating glass windows for small businesses, because obviously you need glass windows for your home or for your business. He lost it all because the communists thought that this was perverse, and he was considered, a class enemy. That's what they used to call it, inamic de classe, which means that he was a bourgeois, even though he had like 3 employees and he was struggling to make it. He lost everything. He had it confiscated, and it was redistributed with large quotes, because in every one of these regimes that claims to be fair, there are actually elites who position themselves at the top and accumulate much more than the rest of the people, which is very common. And utopias never work in practice because of human greed. And we never were able to recover that because the communists also burned down all the documents and everything else that was related to this small wealth that could have been had. And this also goes back to houses. The communists did not do this to my family, but it was very common to deport people. This meant that you would be abducted. I'm not even sure if there is a more polite term to describe it. They would take you from where you were leaving, make you abandon your house, your neighbors, everything else, and they would move you somewhere else where you did not know anyone else, and you had to start from scratch. And this was the Stalin way of handling communism, and this was a way for you to forget your roots and basically legitimize this totalitarian ideology by making people build their lives around it, as opposed to remembering what they used to be and what their family members were. They would get moved and have to adapt in a new place according to the new rules, which meant that they would appropriate the rules more willingly just because they did not want to die, obviously. So being a Romanian comes with all of these experiences, which in my generation, they have been forgotten to some extent. Like, you still find in universities young Marxists who are like, no, we never had real communism. We should do it like I say, not as they did. But they don't really realize that they're not much different, and they would pretty much do the exact same. So there was my parents' generation, which was born under communism, and they were never really allowed to own anything. Everything was given to them by the state. You were supposed to have a job, so there was 0% unemployment, even if your job meant nothing, and you're basically digging up holes so somebody else can cover them. That was still considered to be work. And if you had a job, you were given an apartment by the state, and it was not yours. It was not your private property, but you were allowed to live there for as long as you kept your job. It was very hard to get fired, but for whatever reason, if you got fired and you got moved to some sort of other business in which you had to work, they would also get you a new place. If you're on top, like a party member, and you're like a leader in your community, you had a better, nicer apartment, as opposed to the working class, which sometimes had these one-room apartments that were very crammed, and they had to adapt to that kind of situation. Anyway, my parents had their wedding on the 25th of November of 1989. And exactly 1 month later, the regime collapsed. And if you know anything about weddings, then you know that there are some sort of fundraising events where young people just raise funds to start a new life. And they did raise some money, and they wanted to buy a new car with it. And in communism, if you wanted to buy a new car, you had to deposit all of the money in the state's bank account and then wait for 6 to 12 months to have your vehicle delivered. And they did that, except that the regime collapsed a month later. So what happened to their money? Well, they recovered their money like 3 or 4 years later, except that due to inflation, the exact same money that was supposed to buy them a new car was returned to them, and they could purchase only a couch for the bedroom. So that's the kind of experience which I inherited from my parents, that they trusted the system. They basically deposited the money within the system in the local currency, and they got screwed big time by hyperinflation. So maybe that to you Americans, Bitcoin sounds stupid and you expect something like a national currency to be very stable. But if you take a look outside, this is just, the point of view of an Eastern European who maybe has a better life than someone from South America or from some African country. So even if you look at Turkey today, you're going to see that last month their currency collapsed by 40%, which is insane. And right now they're taking police officers into supermarkets to make sure that the prices are not increased according to inflation, which is the state way of controlling the prices. They're trying to suppress everything, even if it comes at the cost of keeping businesses profitable and, help them break even to stay in business. It doesn't matter to them. It's very authoritarian. There's a big world out there that requires some sort of monetary system which is neutral and cannot be influenced by the decisions of a handful of people who are in power on a certain territory. And there's also a huge requirement for the kind of money which lets you flee your country without having everything taken away from you. Right now, people cheer to the fact that you cannot cross the borders within the European Union with more than 10,000 euro in cash. But that's actually a way for the governments to retain more control over you. And if they get more authoritarian than this, it's going to work in their favor because people are going to try to sell everything that they own and start a new life somewhere else. Obviously, if they use banks that are within their country, it's likely that the funds are going to get confiscated. And if they use cash, they're going to have to basically register at the border and explain where they got it from. And they are at the risk of having everything confiscated. So something like Bitcoin, which allows you to grab 12 words on a piece of paper and use them to recover your funds wherever you go, that's a huge value proposition. It's something that we haven't seen before. It's something that the world needs, and we should not take it for granted and make sure that the network works and remains decentralized and functional.
Yeah. I'm getting some
feedback here.
Is that, hold on, let me turn down. Okay. All right. I noticed that on your shows a lot, you talk a lot about wallets, and you get pretty technical and interviewing people to talk about their wallets. And so that's really important to you. And I think a lot of people, newbies starting out, don't really understand that you're talking about crossing borders, with 10,000 or more in the US, you have to declare it. But with Bitcoin and with crypto too, it's just, you're not actually holding that coin. You're holding the keys to it, the words, the passphrase for access to the blockchain. So technically you're not carrying that money over the border because it's not within any type of border. That's what a lot of people don't seem to understand, the difference between a wallet actually holding a currency and something being on the blockchain. And but yeah, it's interesting to see that you are very fascinated with a lot of different types of wallets. Can you talk a little bit about that, about why a lot of your episodes are very focused on wallets?
Well, the wallets are the interface that you use to communicate with the network. If it's a monetary network, as in the case of Bitcoin, you're going to need a wallet to be able to interact with it. And at the same time, you have two types of wallets. You have the ones that are non-custodial and put you in charge of your own keys. And this power of having your own funds and do whatever you want with them comes with the responsibility of taking care of your backup to make sure that you're not going to lose them or that you're not going to get hacked. The other side of the debate has this banking system reinvented for the blockchain. which is the custodial wallets, where somebody else promises to take good care of your funds in exchange for something. Like it can be like a small commission, or it might be just the fact that they are using your Bitcoin to trade and possibly make investments. So they might also do some sort of fractional reserving, which is against the spirit of Bitcoin and is the reason why Bitcoin exists in the first place, to prove that we have liquidity and the supply is this, as opposed to something that's projected or promised on a piece of paper and you cannot verify. In Bitcoin, you're supposed to also be able to always be able to verify. So I don't think the compromise of using a custodian is really worth it. Some people say that it's safer to just leave it on Kraken or Coinbase or whatever because they never got hacked. They also present the case of Binance sometimes, but Binance got hacked. Their exchange got hacked and their database for KYC data got hacked. And, the hackers of the KYC data tried to extort some Bitcoins from the exchange as a way to not publish everything on some sort of hackers forum, which they did. And a lot of users got owned, got pwned, PWNED, because they were reckless and they trusted Binance. So you should not trust any exchange with this because they are such huge honeypots. And sometimes when they want to scale and they want, for example, when the price goes up very quickly and there are lots of people who want to buy whatever SHIB because that's fashionable for whatever reason, they have to subcontract some sort of data collection companies that handle KYC to be able to scale the demand, because they're not able to operate within some jurisdictions without asking for all of that data, which I guess is fine to some extent, but you should know better and look for exchanges that don't ask you for all of that data, like the ones from Switzerland. But that's besides the point. So you have all of these third-party risks that are involved with using exchanges, and you have to trust that they're being honest. Just because it was never hacked to this day, it doesn't mean that it cannot happen. We have all of these examples of Bitcoin exchanges that got hacked, even if they try to prove themselves solvent or they try to have good PR. They said that their funds are safe or whatever that's supposed to mean. Never trust anyone else with your money. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. If you trust somebody else with your money, then you're basically reinventing the same kind of system from which we are trying to escape. And that's never a good idea, because you allow them to do lots of maneuvers that are not very much in the spirit of Bitcoin. They're going to end up lending your Bitcoins or using them to make some sort of investment that they think is safe. And if everyone does a Bitcoin run, as in a bank run for their Bitcoin, they're going to discover that the exchange doesn't have all the funds. And there's a reason why, if you want to withdraw all of your Bitcoin from an exchange, there's like a waiting time. Most of it has to do with the fact that exchanges keep their coins in cold storage. So they have to transfer the coins from cold storage to their hot wallets to be able to transfer them to you afterwards. So this might be one of the reasons. But the other one is that they actually have to do some accounting to figure out to which extent your withdrawal is sustainable. If you're like a whale, you're going to cause a lot of problems to them because they have to figure out, if they don't have enough Bitcoin to give to you. I'm not ever going to have that problem, but it's an example. If they don't have enough Bitcoin, they have to figure out how to get it. So it's interesting. Most likely they're going to lend it against some of their other shitcoins or whatever, or sell some of their shitcoins, dump them for Bitcoin to be able to pay one of their customers who's trying to withdraw. Like, there are so many, variables involved, and I don't think the risk is really worth it, not even with lending services like BlockFi or Celsius. They are not paying you enough for what Bitcoins offer you when you keep them in your own custody. They're not going to grant you the same censorship resistance or anonymity or confiscation resistance, because obviously they can work with their local authorities and freeze your funds and not allow you to withdraw. And then you find yourself in a situation where you have no idea what to do. It was the case with Iranian Bitcoiners in 2018, when there was that trade embargo which prevented all financial services from the US to work with anyone from Iran. And it's not your fault that the government fucked up and ended up in that kind of situation. You just wanted to benefit from a service. But the fact that that service comes from a country which is diplomatically in not very good terms with your own country, you're being punished for something which is not even your fault. So the risk of keeping your coins on exchanges is greater than any advantage. And if you are afraid of keeping your coins on exchanges, like I have some hardware wallets here, like there's the Trezor, it's like $70. You can find it anywhere. Just make sure you don't buy it used. It has a fairly decent amount of security. I don't think
you trust Trezor, and you trust Kobo and Ledger and Seed Signer, and you've gone through a plethora of different wallets on your show. How do you know? That all those are safe.
So there is the Trezor, which is like the OG hardware wallet. It was launched in 2014. It's tried and tested. A lot of people have tried to hack it. Some have succeeded. Most of them have reported the issues, ethically to the developers, and all of them have been fixed so far. So it's still going on very well. It can be hacked physically, so that's a well-known flaw with the Trezor because they try to be open source with everything, so everything is known about it. If you gain physical access to it, I think you can hack it in like 20 minutes. But if you have a passphrase on top of your 12-word seed, they can have your 12-word seed, but if they don't know the passphrase, they're not going to be able to access your funds. So that's a way to get around it. A passphrase is like a password that you choose yourself and is not part of the BIP39 list of words, which has 2048 words. You can choose whatever. You can say Vlad is awesome 69, and that can be your passphrase. And nobody else is going to guess.
That's not your passphrase, is it?
Oh, no. I have more complicated ones. There's also the Blockstream Jade, which is also affordable and is kind of nice. It has its own battery. I just booted it without knowing. I just pressed the button. There's also the Bitbox02, which I really like. It's made in Switzerland. I have it somewhere around here. I accidentally found the Trezor Model T, which is the nicer model with the touchscreen input and some extra features. I don't think it's worth the $200, but don't tell Trezor that because they sponsored my podcast for a season, and I would want them back. What else do I have here? I think this used to be the most expensive one.
That looks like a Nokia.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Passport. It looks like a mobile phone. I guess it has the best form factor of all of them because nobody's going to know that this is a Bitcoin device. This looks like a Bitcoin device. This doesn't.
They might question why you're walking around with an old Nokia.
Yeah, I don't know. You can find lots of reasons why you're using an old Nokia. But this is very nice. So I would recommend it, but it's more complicated than your Trezor because it has no first-party wallet, and you have to use something like Wasabi or like Electrum or Sparrow or Spectre. I've seen that these are also popular. So you have to use PSBT, which means that you connect an SD card to the device and then you do the operations and then you put your SD card into your computer to validate the operations. It's like, taking extra steps to make sure that your transaction is secure. There are no actual, scientific researches which prove that PSBT has security benefits, but it definitely makes your Bitcoins harder to spend. So to some people, that's an extra layer of peace of mind. I knocked off something. I'm looking for the Bitbox02, but I cannot find it. I know that I have one in the box that I'm going to unbox on my channel soon.
How many wallets do you have?
All of them. That's the correct answer.
You're a Bitcoin wallet nerd. That's awesome.
Mostly because I have recorded seasons 4 and 8 of my podcast that were about these devices. So
Uh-huh.
I had to actually grab them and play with them, as the people I've interviewed were not, the marketing department. They were the people who actually built these. So
Yeah.
I had to be able to keep up with them and ask them actual questions about how this works to make, the show useful.
Yeah.
But from my experience, I know that Ledger is popular, but I would not use Ledger.
Hmm.
I think that your wallet should do exactly what it says it does, and you should be able to verify that it does what you says it does. And with Ledger, there is an extra layer of trust.
Yeah.
There's also the keystone, which I can see that I have right here. This looks like a mini tablet of sorts.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's pretty cool from a point of view because it has the best input. It scans QR codes with the camera. It's really interesting, but at the same time, it's not as open source as the others. So that's one of the reasons why I would only use this in a multi-sig setup as opposed to allowing this to generate my BIP39 seed phrase and using it as a single signature device. And
Yeah.
there's also the cold card with which I have a hate-love relationship. This one is still sealed. I haven't opened it yet.
Looks like a pocket calculator.
Yeah, except that I've told Rodolfo from CoinKite, who by the way blocked me in the meantime, that this one only has numerical keys. So a calculator is supposed to have a plus, a minus, a multiply, and a divide button
Yeah.
to the very least to look credible. Someone's gonna look at it and know what this is.
That's a dollar store calculator right there.
Yeah, they should. I don't know if they care too much about the aesthetics or the OPSEC, but so far this one is the best at not looking as what it actually is.
That's pretty
Somehow.
cool. You're focused real hard on store of value, which is what Bitcoin seems. It's whenever people on the Ethereum side of things, or in the other realm of crypto world, the shite coins, they always see Bitcoin as the store of value. I hold Bitcoin. I like Bitcoin, and most people do. There are a few people that are just like, it's just for dinosaurs, boomer coin. But it's a store of value. So do you see Bitcoin being a currency in a place like Romania, or even the United States for that matter?
You have the Lightning Network, which makes Bitcoin anything you want it to be.
Okay.
Scale when it's fully developed and it has. I think that Square, or whatever the company of Jack Dorsey is called, I think they're doing a very good job at trying to build some dev kits, something that lesser experienced developers can pick up to build applications, because that's something that Ethereum has done, and that's part of the reason why they have so many applications, because you have all of these kits that you just take the API and you build something on top of it, and you're going to have something that resembles your vision for an application. And Bitcoin so far has been very focused on building something that's robust. That's the biggest concern, security.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there is a debate about BIP 119, which is about enabling more advanced smart contracts on the Bitcoin base layer.
Uh-huh.
And I see that the reception, even if the idea sounds good, the reception is that they should spend more time experimenting with it to refine it and find better ways to rewrite the same amount of code. And it was the same with Taproot before it. Taproot got activated a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big event because it took like 4 years to refine that proposal. And that's kind of the point of it, because they spent so much time testing and optimizing, and they had more ideas for it, but they discovered that they don't really have any benefits to the purpose of the project. So they removed lines of code and they made it as compact and as functional as they could. That's kind of the whole point of it. With Bitcoin, you want everything to work very well, and yeah, they don't compromise with this. but they're going to have more experimentation on second layer, on side chains, and all of that stuff. And you can already see, for example, that there is the Liquid sidechain, which is doing something like OpenSea for NFTs, and it's called Rare Toshi. And you also have the Lightning Network, which has something that's going to incorporate all of these features. It's going to be called RGB Spectrum, and it will enable to have all sorts of, rare pepes and tokens on top of it. It's really interesting. And to some extent, base layer stuff is not going away. Counterparty, about which I have spoken before, is first layer, is a protocol that uses Bitcoin transactions to settle everything. So whenever you send an NFT from a counterparty wallet to the other, you're paying a Bitcoin transaction to the miners, and it contributes to the security of the network. So I think that this is going to keep on existing for the simple reason that tokens that have been issued on this protocol are going to be more expensive to transfer, and they're going to exist for a longer time. I think it's safe to say that if Bitcoin has been so robust up to this point, it will most likely outlive us. So if this exists on Bitcoin forever, I suppose it's going to be more valuable, as opposed to something like a sidechain, which depends on a group of developers to maintain it. There is a lot of value in something that's on the first layer, and there will always be people willing to pay for something that's more robust and is more likely to exist. And speaking of, I've created an NFT just for this show. So if you want to get your first NFT on Bitcoin on Counterparty, I think there's a link in the description. It's basically the graphics of season 10 of the Bitcoin Takeover Podcast, to which you can listen to learn more about Counterparty NFTs and how the artists who created it actually came to this realization that you can do this on Bitcoin. And this was before any other chain did it. So you can get it from a dispenser. A dispenser is like a vending machine, which allows you to unlock the asset that you want to purchase after you pay a certain amount. You're supposed to use a counterparty wallet like Counter Wallet, like Freeport, or like freewallet.io in order to enjoy the whole experience. They are basically Bitcoin wallets that also let you see the JPEGs that you receive. So
freewallet.io.
Yeah, I think that one is the best for desktop. It's the most optimized. It's also the one that's being maintained. And I've put a price of like $10 in Bitcoin just to avoid, spam. I don't want anyone to be able to seize all of them. If you want to get your first one, you get it for $10 and experience what it's like. So this is more like a spam prevention mechanism, the fact that I put a price to it, like a price tag. You can also say that, it's the starting price, and you can try to speculate and make more money on it. I don't care about that. You're free to do whatever. I'm just trying to make this available to as many people who are really interested, so that I don't get one party who takes away all of them for basically free.
Yeah.
There are 50 of them in the dispenser. I suppose there's going to be one for you too, if you're interested.
Right on. Yeah, totally. I love this whole concept of NFTs on Bitcoin. For Ethereans, that's mainly a lot of my audience is people from the US and people who are into Ethereum. I'm pretty heavily involved in Bankless DAO, and there's a bunch of NFT projects in there. And then when I've brought up, there's NFTs on Bitcoin, most people are super surprised. So it's not really that well known. Do you think it might be kind of the case of Betamax versus VHS? There might be, the older, more established, better product out there, but VHS took over because it was just, everywhere and widely adopted. And that's how they got ahead back in the 80s. I don't know if you know about the VHS versus beta wars, but
no, I know. I also know about Laserdisc because I'm a nerd. But
I figured you would.
No, I don't think it's like that, because if you want to move your NFT to another chain, you can burn the token and issue it on the different chain so that you don't affect the supply. That's something that has been done. That's not something that I would do. I'm trying to promote this on Bitcoin because it pays for the security budget of the network. We have seen in later months, in the last few months, we have seen that the blocks were not as full as before, and mining was not as profitable. And if we really want Bitcoin to succeed, we need miners to get paid properly to be able to withstand, I suspect that there's going to be a bear market that's coming. We want mining to remain profitable. And I suppose that in order for that to work, we also need to pay more fees and encourage them to run their operations.
Mm.
This is the security risk of Bitcoin mainly, that as the subsidy reduces and gets halved every 4 years, we have to build a competitive fee market to keep up with the electricity costs and everything else involved in the network. So we actually have to pay fees to be able to sustain that. And as we have seen, I suspect that the Chinese miners were gaming all of this mempool situation. They were filling the network with transactions between themselves at high fees so that people using newbie wallets like, I don't know, blockchain.com or something that suggests to you a median fee to pay, they would rip you off, because if you actually took a look at the mempool to see what the average fee is, you would realize, okay, I can pay a lot less than this. But they contributed to this narrative that Bitcoin is expensive to use. And today it's a lot cheaper than Ethereum or any other layer one, which, I don't know, has seen a high spike in fees.
Yeah.
I think you can get transaction through in the next block for less than $1 right now, which is kind of incredible.
For NFT?
For an NFT, yes.
Okay. Because I know NFTs are pretty expensive sometimes to get through on Ethereum, definitely.
Yeah, so if you want to sell my NFT on Ethereum, you can just buy it for the $10, then burn it and issue it on the different chain and provide some proof that it belongs from there and put it on OpenSea or whatever. I don't care. Just do whatever. Yeah. I'm happy that
I keep it on Bitcoin on Counterparty just for the spirit of it. I've said in the announcement to this, I try not to create an echo chamber, because then all you hear is stuff you want to hear. And I want to learn and hear about new stuff. And I want my audience to hear about things that they may not have heard of before as well.
It's not really new stuff, just so you know. It's from 2014.
Yeah, it's older. That's the crazy thing about it. It was there before. And the whole, but the idea of the op return function too is something that Komodo chain uses, and I believe Ravencoin chain uses. How is this different from that? And do you have a little comparison?
I don't know anything about Komodo.
Okay.
And what I know about Ravencoin is that it was co-created by Bruce Fenton. Mm-hmm. At least the white paper was co-written by Bruce Fenton, and Bruce Fenton is very much into securities and has worked on Wall Street before he got into Bitcoin. So that's why he created Ravencoin. Part of the reason was that he wanted to put securities on chain, and that's something that Counterparty did before. The reason why Counterparty was shunned and disregarded for such a long time was possibly because some people thought that it was spamming the network, as Bitcoin is supposed to be this monetary system that should get transactions through as efficiently as possible. And maybe that some developers were not happy with people transacting frog memes, as opposed to actual money. So
Ravencoin was running under the premise that it was costing too much in equipment to mine Bitcoin. So they wanted to democratize Bitcoin by bringing it back to the GPU. So do you think that's possible to maintain the same type of decentralization and security, or are we going to continue to have the heavy mining equipment?
Well, if there is enough interest for that coin, then people are going to build ASICs. And in order to circumvent this advantage that is granted to ASICs, they're going to have to hard fork and change their hashing algorithm to something else that does not have ASICs. And this is an uphill battle. They're going to have all the time to have a hard fork to remove this. It's something that happened with Monero, for example, which they want to CPU mine all the time, and they don't want to have any kind of ASICs. And they could do this to Bitcoin, but there is a very high risk of, making users fall behind and be on the wrong chain. And they're trying to have a consistency with everything that they're doing. It's part of the reason why they also use soft forks, which mean that it's optional for you to adopt this new standard, but in time it will become a standard. So maybe that the adoption, for example, with SegWit, right now the adoption is at 60-70% since 2017. At some point it will become the standard and everyone will be using SegWit addresses. But it's not something imposed right now, as it happens with hard forks, that the rest of the network is supposed to update their nodes and run this new software, which requires more testing. With soft forks, you can see it live. You can update it. You can make some changes before it becomes the absolute standard and everyone uses it. So I think I diverged a bit from what your point was. But, there is a reason why Counterparty was not so highly regarded, as its initial point was to put stocks and bonds and gold and commodities, whatever, on the Bitcoin blockchain and transact them. And I think that the purpose, the mission was very noble, to be able to do all of these in a decentralized and trustless and permissionless way. But at the same time, it doesn't scale. And that's why I guess only the purposes that don't need it to scale have survived, like NFTs. You only transact NFTs as high value transactions when there's actually interest and there's demand for it. So there's no need for this to have 10,000 transactions per second. You only need to transact one card to the collector who's interested in acquiring this piece of history. If you want to transact it on a second layer with faster speed, or you want to move it to another chain, you have ways to do that. But there's Counterparty, and it works for high value NFTs. You can mint it for less than $1 today. So if you're into that, I suppose you should do it before you're not gonna be able to do it anymore because of the high fees. I suspect that will happen in 4 years, maybe. So you heard it here first. If you want to mint any NFTs on Bitcoin with Counterparty, you should do it now while it's still inexpensive. And you never know where it's going to go, or how much is going to be worth it. I have recorded interviews with a lot of people like Shaban, who created Spells of Genesis, like Mandelduck, who created Sarutobi. Also, Joe, what's his last name? Joe Looney and Sean Leary, who were some of the original creators of Rare Pepes, and they set up the Rare Pepe directory. You're going to hear all of these in season 10 of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. Right now, I'm editing an episode, which is a 4-way interview with Bitcoin NFT creators who basically put them on the Bitcoin blockchain because they had this vision of having in-game assets that are not owned by the development company. So they were kind of ahead of their time, because nowadays you have this very huge spike in popularity with in-game assets in Fortnite or in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and all of these games which have a centralized marketplace for this kind of stuff. So basically your hard-earned assets, something for which you put 10,000 hours or more, are at the mercy of some sort of central provider of service. And it's not an issue of if, it's an issue of when they're going to turn off their servers and everything is going to be gone. So they figured out that you can basically put this on a blockchain. Obviously, on a blockchain, it doesn't really scale because there are lots of storage and computation costs. But with, second layers and stuff like that, it's going to be a lot more efficient. Or Solana, which is, blatantly centralized. They don't care much about it, but they provide the service that people want.
Yeah, and a lot of people say with NFTs now, the people that are adopting it, they're not. You don't start with the whole what is money, what is fungibility conversation with people on NFTs now. It's just not the focus of this new brand of adopter, I guess. and they're not as worried about, I guess, centralization as in the past years. And then, as Bitcoiners have been brought up to religiously hold to as of decentralization. So do you think that's true about these new NFT adopters not necessarily being as concerned about the whole centralization aspect?
Well, they should care because it kind
Do
of
you think that?
defeats the purpose if anyone can turn it off.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole shtick. If it can be turned off, then it's not decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
That's the question to which all of these projects must answer. Can anyone turn this off? And it's not just about one person, it's about how much effort or how many people it takes, under ransom or whatever kind of scenario to turn it off and make everyone lose their money. And that's even possible with Ethereum because you have 5 people who can get in a conference room and decide what the next hard fork is going to be. So there are lots of risks about which we don't really talk about. And we go with the flow just because we see a lot of liquidity going into this space and a lot of speculative money.
Mm-hmm.
And we should be more cautious. And if we really care about these projects, we should do our best to run nodes to make sure that they're decentralized so that if there is some sort of point of failure, you are part of it. You are going to be part of that threat model, and they also have to go through you to turn off the network. Mm-hmm. So that's why, for example, I run a Bitcoin node. I know that the whole history of transactions up to this block right now is being stored on a small Raspberry Pi that's in my apartment. So
yeah, Florian Stellian brought up a point. Do you have the chat pulled up on your screen here? He jumped in. He says Lightning Raspberry Pi is very cheap and private to use the Bitcoin. He said he learned all these things from you and your magazine. So, but there is a learning curve to running a node and using Lightning Network and Raspberry Pi. That's a lot higher than in some of these other, I guess, like Solana is pretty damn centralized.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you think a lot of these other chains can be, I guess, gateways in order to be able to get more involved and then start the conversation about some, the idea of freedom, about bringing in the conversation about how, hey, this is great and all, you have all this, and you're able to make money using this type of structure, but the light switch can be flipped off, and here's how to prevent that.
Well, I like to think that projects like Dogecoin or Litecoin or whatever, they are very educational and instructional for using Bitcoin later on because basically there are forks. With stuff that's an Ethereum clone, I mean, that's a lot more complicated, but it's still, feasible as long as they use wallets, they use addresses, they scan QR codes, they transact, and they understand how markets work. I mean, that can be very educational, even though I discourage speculative investment in something that doesn't really have a good fundamental analysis. Like, I would not encourage anyone to invest in something that doesn't look good on the, 10 to 20 years spectrum. Mm-hmm. Like, if it doesn't look like it's going to exist in 10 years, I would not put any money into it, even if it looks like it's going to make 200x next week or whatever.
Okay.
So I like to sleep at night. And if I know I put money into some sort of shitcoin that's supposed to 100x, I cannot sleep. Like, I want to know what's going on.
So you're not a degen.
It's not like Bitcoin is boring anyway. There's so many swings. I don't look at the price as much as I used to, but it's still wild. We are still in the early days, even if it sounds very reassuring, and you hear this a lot in the space, like, oh, you have no idea how early we are. As long as people in the street have no idea how to use a wallet, we are very early.
Yeah.
And I run this experiment sometimes. So Lightning is not that hard to use. There are actually some very good wallets. One of them is on Android right now and is called Breeze, Breez. And it runs some wizardry in the background and makes you use a full node in So it uses block filters, it uses LND in a way that doesn't have any kind of trusted third party. You don't connect to somebody else's node, you become your own with a minimal amount of data. So that's something that I like about it. And there's also, what's the name of it? There's one on iOS which does something very similar. Maybe I'm going to remember the name. But
you probably remember later on tonight. You just wake up.
Yeah, that's always the problem.
Yeah.
You never remember what you're supposed to when it actually counts. But what I'm trying to say is that you have all of these wallets that are very easy to use and make it stupid simple. Like last week, I took a train ride to the place where I celebrated my New Year's Eve. And I was in the same train with a few young people. So I was like, would you like to receive $5 worth of Bitcoin? And I just sent them $5 worth of Bitcoin on the Lightning Network and proved to them, this is so fast. Like,
okay,
this is the money of the future. You should know about it.
Yeah.
You can hold that. You can spend it on gift cards, on Bitrefill. You can gamble it on some sort of roulette website. But if I were you, I would just hold it and try to accumulate more or whatever. It's your choice. You just received your first $5.
Doing the Lord's work.
Yeah, and I realized that it's so easy to them. It's so intuitive. Like university students are very responsive to this kind of stuff. They intuitively know how it works because most likely they have banking applications on their phones. And it's very similar. So the way that wallets work nowadays on mobile, they look a lot like your banking wallet. So congratulations to the UX designers. You have done a great job. I did not have to work too hard to explain to them how this works. They were kind of blown away by the fact that you can set any fiat currency as the receiving one. So you're going to receive Bitcoin, obviously, but you can denominate in lots of fiat currencies. So they could exchange, services to each other and pay like 5 lei, lei being the local currency, which is really cool. And I have no idea where it's going to go from here. I hope that they hodl most of all, because maybe in 5 years they're going to be like, oh, I can pay my rent with this $5 from 5 years ago. Hopefully.
Well, here's what I'd say quite a bit on my show, and you can tell me whether you think this is accurate or not. I say a lot of times Bitcoin and Ethereum can get along, that they're not even the same. Bitcoin is a store of value and Ethereum is the internet computer in a way. Bitcoin in the future, well beyond whenever we're passed away, will be it will be the source of truth. You're buying truth basically with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is going to be something that nation states will settle treaties on in the future, where Ethereum will be the settlement layer of transactions with all these other little, layer 2 solutions working on top of it for the day-to-day transactions.
Yeah, I don't think governments are going to use Bitcoin anytime soon, even if they accept it as legal tender, which is to this day in El Salvador a custodial experience to which I'm not a fan, because it gets Orwellian and the government knows everything. And that's not my vision of adoption. And I think that governments should use gold instead, because it's harder to move around. It has actual weight to it. It has historical value. They should stick to gold. That's the currency for governments. Individuals, on the other hand, actually need something like Bitcoin.
So you think Bitcoin will be a currency, as an actual transactional currency? Okay.
You should try using Lightning. Seriously. Okay. Are you on Android or iOS?
iOS. I should not be on iOS, man.
I'm going to send you a message with the wallet that you can use. I think also Breeze is available, but it's still in test flight mode. So it was not approved by Apple yet. I'm very sorry that nobody in the chat knows the name of that iOS wallet. I think Blue Wallet works very well, but by default, it connects to the Blue Wallet servers. So it's not that non-custodial experience to which I want to onboard you.
You were going to do a giveaway too. I don't want to forget that.
Oh, I don't want to forget either, because I suppose that's why
Yeah,
Florian.
we're just at an hour in, and I wanted to make sure that wasn't passed up.
Yes. So I'm supposed to pick three numbers from 1 to 60. I suppose that the fairest way would be to show it, but I don't know how to use this interface to show my screen.
You can share your screen. There should be a button there.
Okay, let me try.
Okay.
So select window or entire screen. Okay. Unable to share screen. There is nothing to share. Make sure the browser has a permission. Oh. Okay, so I think I should change. Is there any way you can share yours? And
yeah.
You just go to random.org.
Okay, so
program it to pick a number from 1 to 60.
All right, so
and it's going to be your call. So I have 3 prizes. The first one is a Raspberry Pi Node from Raspberry Blitz. The second one is a hardware wallet that's a Bitbox O2 made in Switzerland. And the third one is $50 worth of Bitcoin.
All right, let me pull this up.
Random.org.
Random.org. Okay, let me go up here. You know about pre-search, that search engine?
No.
I love that search engine. It's a decentralized blockchain-based search engine. Okay, random.org. All right.
So it's supposed to pick a number from 1 to 60. Actually, 3 numbers from 1 to 60. And you just tell me what the numbers are, and then I'm going to have to figure out who these people are.
All right.
You want me to announce live? I suppose it would help your views and viewers if I announce who they are, but I'm going to have to search for it. So let me know.
So 1 to 60, you said? Okay.
Yes.
All right. You ready? Drum roll.
So what's the prize? You get to choose which one of them this is.
So
there's the hardware wallet, and there's the $50 worth of Bitcoin.
You want to do the hardware wallet?
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'll get ready. Count down. 3, 2, 1. Generate. 8.
Number 8. Okay. Now go for $50 worth of Bitcoin.
All right. Drum roll. 3, 2, 1. Generate. 30.
30. Okay. And now for the big prize, which is worth $600.
$600. All right.
Oh yeah. This is like the biggest chunk of the money I've made in December, but I want to give back to my listeners and fans of the podcast. So this is for a Raspberry Pi node, which runs both Bitcoin and Lightning. It's from Raspberry Blitz by Fulmo. And just for the record, I do not own the gift, so you're going to have to order them, and I make the purchase when you get to the checkout screen. So that's how it works. I don't want to know where you live or stuff like that. I'll just make the payment.
Right on. And this is completely random, and you heard it here. All right, here goes. Drum roll. 1, 3, 2, 1. Generate. 9. Number 9.
Number 9. Okay, so now I'm going to have to do a couple of searches to figure out who these people are. So if you can just talk for the next 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, so anyway, I love the whole idea of Counterparty. Counterparty does not necessarily have its own blockchain. It runs separately, and it uses Bitcoin blockchain, right? And then let's see, your guest that I listened to yesterday on the podcast was Theo Goodman, and he called Counterparty the vinyl of NFTs. I liked that analogy. He was, because I collect vinyl, and so to me, vinyl seems more crisp. It has a nice crackle to it. It's you get to open up the booklet, and you get to have the experience of the band. But vinyl can be expensive. And if you want to create your own vinyl, it kind of has a higher barrier to entry. Those are some things I thought about, and not necessarily everybody and every musician is able to just run out and press their own vinyl, because they always have to start out as NFT first, and not as NFT, as MP3 first, like on SoundCloud or something like that, to make and distribute their music. And nowadays, if they kind of want to be like, a good grassroots musician, you have to start out just by, recording some, piddly little track on your Audacity laptop or something like that, turn it into an MP3, put it up on SoundCloud, and then once you gain an audience, maybe you have some money, you can press some vinyl. So how does that analogy work with NFTs on Bitcoin and other types of platforms like Ethereum and other NFT platforms? Tezos even, Tezos seems kind of like it could be the poor man's NFT platform. And there's some really good art on Tezos that is very grassroots. So yeah, any thoughts about that analogy?
Well, I don't think it's really like that. So you're comparing physical media to something which is digital.
Okay.
And in the case of Counterparty, it's the same as pretty much every other one. You might pay more for the fees if there's a lot of demand for block space. Today, as of right now, I'm checking to see what the fees are, and they are around 60 cents for a high priority transaction. So if you want to get your transaction in the next block, if you want to mint an NFT in the next 10 minutes, you're gonna have to pay only 60 cents for it. So
I think anybody could afford that.
Yeah. I figured out who the winners are.
Okay.
So there's Brandon Ryan, who won the Bitbox 02. Let's go, Brandon. So he was number 8. For the $50 worth of Bitcoin, there's Neko Nechnik, something like that. I'm gonna message you personally. And for the full node, there's Investing Dan. So he is the winner. And I'm going to contact you. You don't have to contact me, because it's very easy on Twitter to create impersonator accounts and change one letter to a number which looks just like it. So yeah, I wrote these down. I'm gonna make sure that you get your prizes. And this was it. Thank you for participating in this giveaway. I'm gonna be like $750 poorer by the end of this interview.
Yeah, but it's worth it. It's fun. I appreciate you doing that giveaway on my show.
Yeah, it grants you an extra layer of objectivity. Like, I could record it or I could broadcast it and people would be mad, like, oh, but you picked your favorites or whatever.
Yeah.
This is a very good way to have like a witness and provide this extra layer of randomness. Like, I did not witness. They can blame you.
Yeah. Yeah, man, this has been rad. I keep these to an hour, but I got a lot to learn. I need to learn more about Counterparty. I need to learn more about Bitcoin. Honestly, I started the whole thing, learning about SHA-256 and learning about what is money and fungibility and all that stuff. And then I started going down like the DeFi and Ethereum rabbit hole, and I kind of let Bitcoin go to the wayside. And I still dollar cost average in Bitcoin, and I'm not going to leave and sell my Bitcoin. That's my untouchable, but I like to have fun in DeFi and in GameFi and all these new metaverse projects that are coming out on Ethereum. So what you've kind of reintroduced to me is a way to have fun on Bitcoin, because you shouldn't take the aspect of fun out of crypto. I mean, isn't that how Dogecoin was born? Billy Marcus and Jackson Palmer were making fun of a lot of the Bitcoin people that took it way too seriously. And so he created Dogecoin just kind of as a kind of a thumb in the nose, So
yeah, and we're supposed to have fun, otherwise we go crazy. At the same time, if you have listeners who are more on, I'm not trying to say poor, but if they cannot afford to buy, hashes, cryptographic hashes that are represented by JPEGs, then you probably shouldn't just save your Bitcoin on something else. But there's this other side of people who are collectors and who want to have all sorts of stuff. So if they were not into NFTs, they would be probably into stamps or baseball cards or Pokemon cards or whatever, Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, I got a Garbage Pail Kids and baseball cards right here. So.
Yeah. So there are these people who like to collect, and there's a market for this. And if you're able to create something that they like, they're going to grab it. If you want to start your journey, I've provided, so I'm, shamelessly self-advertising my dispenser. It's in the video description. You can get your first NFT on Bitcoin by using that. And the wallet that I recommend is called freewallet.io. There's a different free wallet that's different, and it's a multi-coin wallet. Don't use that one. It's freewallet.io. And if you can, use it on a desktop computer or laptop, because it's more updated, more maintained on that platform as opposed to mobile.
Okay. Oh, hey, before I forget too, I wanted you to plug your magazine that you have and your book too. You wrote a book about Bitcoin.
So the magazine is 100% my creation.
Okay.
Actually, so can you give me like 5 seconds to grab one so I can go to the camera?
Totally. I want to show people the first animated GIF. Look at this. This is a sport flick. This was this card is 1987. It's Tony Fernandez of the Toronto Blue Jays, and this is well before animated GIFs were around, and well before NFTs were around. So look at that. That's an animated GIF right there.
Okay, so I'm gonna get very excited about this because I basically brought a copy of all the magazine editions that I have created. So basically I have 442, I think, that I printed, and I kept a copy of each, and they were printed in editions. And I've made sure that each one of them would be unique in terms of cover and some bug fixes, because I've worked on this alone and there are some typos. This is the first edition magazine. This is
this roast effect.
Yes, you know what it's called, and I'm proud that you recognize it. This is the first one. 150 copies were created. All of them were given away for free, thanks to the sponsors on the back.
Awesome.
And I'm very proud of it. I'm happy that I made it happen. And yeah, that's all there is to say to it. I suppose that this one is going to be the most expensive, most collectible in time.
That's cool. I'm a huge fan of like media that you can hold. That's why I love vinyl. Yes.
And this is the second edition, which was paid for by Bitrefill, and they wanted 80 copies of this to exist. So I sent 40 of them to their annual team building event or something, and sent the other 40, actually 39, because I have one, to people around the world who wanted one for free. So once again, Bitrefill paid for this. You got it for free. I suppose that this being the second edition is going to get valuable in time. I don't know. That's not up to me. I just keep them for fun. And then there was the third edition, which I issued as an NFT on Raretoshi on Liquid. And this is the rare NFT. Only 21 copies of this one exist. And they were bought by collectors for as much as $100 in Bitcoin. I'm really proud of this one. It also comes with an extra article to justify the fact that I sold it. So actually, the reason why I have it is that this is like a non-functional copy because it has 2 blank pages. And I thought this was subpar, and I did not make it part of the official collection of 21. This is like hidden inflation, the 22nd one. But I did not, since people paid for it, I did not want to sell them something that doesn't have part of one article. So I kept it for myself.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I have like a few more. I don't want to take too much of your time. But
you're all right.
You got me started.
I don't hear any of the family or kids up yet, so it's still early for me. So I'm good.
This is the UK edition, which I sent to CoinFest in November. So this is the 4th edition. I've printed 60 copies of this one, and 59 of them were sent to the guy who paid for this, and his name is Cripsy. And I gave them away for free because he paid for everything, and I made sure that I promote my own work to as many people as possible. And then there was the one that I used, just a second. So I sent this to TabConf, and it's the only one that I did not print myself. It's printed in Atlanta in the United States. It's slightly different in terms of paper quality. I think the paper is a bit thicker, which I appreciate. I got this one because I paid them. So with the money that I made printing the NFT version on Liquid, I paid for these to be given away to all the speakers from the conference, and some of the best and smartest Bitcoin developers were there. I actually have pictures of a couple of them, like Jimmy Song and Sipa. His actual name is Peter Willie, holding this, so I'm very proud. Even Mr. Seed Signer is photographed holding this one, so I'm proud of this accomplishment. 60 of them were printed. There might be 62, I don't know, because it's out of my control. They said that they have a couple of them that did not turn out well. They had some issues. I hold one of them. I suppose they're going to be collectible someday because they are the only ones that So I forgot to mention that all of the ones that were created by me are manually signed and numbered. So you know that this one, for example, wait, which one?
Do you write everything, or how do you create the content?
I wrote everything myself. So
wow.
I'm mirrored. So this is how I numbered the Liquid NFT version. So obviously this is not part of the 21 collection because I noticed the flaw later, but I numbered it and I also signed it. That's my signature right there at the bottom. So you know that this is not, artificial inflation. It's not made by somebody else. I've open sourced it. So if you want to read the content, it's available. You can print your own copy. You can even sell it. But these are the ones that I made myself.
Man, I want to get one of those. I want to hang it right next to this.
Yes, I'm going to send you one. There's also this one, which is the 2021 all-time high edition. When we hit 66K, I decided to make one which celebrates that historic moment. People told me that I was being bearish because we're going to go to 100K and I would have to issue another one for that occasion. I turned out to be right. So in your face.
I don't think anybody could have predicted where Bitcoin is at right now. I heard a minimum of 75,000 by year's end.
And I also have the last one because I'm going to release the second magazine with fresh articles and everything in a couple of weeks. So this is the last one that I made. It was sold on Counterparty as an NFT. So you bought the NFT and you got the magazine as a gift. That's the concept behind it. It's also a physical NFT, just like the other one. This is number 18 out of 21 because I bought it for myself. So I decided to pull this out from, the collection, mostly because I've made a mistake, like a typo here when I wrote Counterparty. It doesn't look so good. So I said, okay, I'm going to keep this for myself.
It's actually kind of cool, real DIY looking. So I'm super into DIY looking stuff.
This is what collectibles should be about.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I got to do this. I would like to thank everyone who received my magazine, even if they paid for it or they got it for free. And I have a second one on the way. Right now, there's an auction on Liquid Vertoshi if you want to get one of the first 21 copies, because some people like that. You can auction for one. The rest of them are going to be given away for free from the first batch because I've searched for sponsorship. And I very much appreciate that there were companies and individuals who were like, okay, I'm going to give you $500, print more magazines with this money. I very much appreciate this because they haven't even seen one page of the actual content. So,
well, I mean, the art on the cover alone is very attractive. It looks really professional. And
the second one has a rare Pepe cover, so I suppose a lot of people are gonna want that one. It was supposed to launch for Christmas, but I failed to deliver on time. So since I failed to deliver on time, I decided to add a couple more articles just for the sake of it. So it's gonna be a lot thicker than this one, a lot bigger, more content, and I'm happy that I get to do this. So first of all, I must thank Joshua from Voltoro. He's the first guy who saw my show. He was the guest on my podcast, and at the end, he accepted to sponsor me. And he doesn't care about metrics. He doesn't care if I'm popular or not. He just wants this to exist. He's like, yeah, you're like a painter, and if I keep on paying you, I'm gonna get a return of investment at some point because he likes that I keep on doing stuff and I enjoy doing stuff. So this is
I love that. That's how it should be. You know, you see somebody that's committed and doing stuff and not looking for perfection, but looking for experimentation. And that's what I see you as. You're a DIY, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps type of dude. You experiment and you're an artist and you put out all this media and you just say, okay, this works, this doesn't, let's try something else and let's just figure it out. And that's why I wanted to have you on. I see that and I admire that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to do what you like to do. There's also a lot of work. Sometimes I spend 14 hours writing or editing. Right now I'm editing an episode from season 10 of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast, which has 3 of the smartest and most involved NFT creators around. They're so OG, like they were some of the first people who drew rare Pepes. And there's also the guy who created Spells of Genesis, which came before rare Pepes. And there's so much to learn from them. It's a 4-way interview, so there's me and 3 other guys. It's harder to edit because there are background noises which I have to remove manually. I have to cut some parts just to be sure that the quality is on par. But it's going to get published by the end of the day. You're in the United States. It's about 6 a.m. where you live. So you're going to have it in a few hours. And that's a good way for you to learn more about the history of and the context and everything about Counterparty that was basically erased by history, because there's a lot of stuff that got built for Bitcoin and there's a lot of experimentation which precedes most altcoins, and we don't really talk about it. And some of it has a resurgence moment, like Counterparty right now. A year ago, nobody really knew what this was, but now there's a huge amount of inflow of liquidity that's coming into Counterparty from people who want to historically possess the first ever NFTs that were created. But the funny part is that the first NFTs were actually on Namecoin, which is the first ever altcoin that was created, and even Satoshi Nakamoto endorsed it. And people issued NFTs and art on that one, except that it's the kind of situation where domains expire, because Namecoin was supposed to replace DNS, domain name services, and make it decentralized to be able to buy domains, which you can do today on Ethereum. For example, you have your .eth domain.
DNS,
yeah, you're able to do that with Namecoin. So some people actually created digital art that they tokenized on Namecoin, and people are trying to retrieve that, to recover it, to be able to own the very first pieces of, art on the blockchain. So it's fascinating. It's like a race to the absolute beginning, and everyone's trying to accumulate more of the first ever NFTs as collectors.
Wow. Yeah. So it'd be a whole new treasure trove of possible value just being dug up.
Yeah, and if you have a good idea or a good concept, you should create it. And if you want to put it on Bitcoin, you should create it right now when the fees are low.
Yeah.
And nobody really knows. Like, I'm not sure if you heard about DJ Pepe. His name is Jay Skrilla. He is a musician who is into hip hop, and also he drew some Pepes. So he had DJ Pepe, which was a card that he was basically giving away for free. There's an interview with him from like 5 years ago when he was trying so hard to convince people that this is like a good idea. Yeah. And right now you can buy one of these cards for like $10,000.
That's insane.
It is. Like, he would give it away for free, just like I gave away most of these magazines, and then the market decided that they're valuable.
Yeah. So as a creator, you should never create to try to create value. You should create to create for creation itself.
Yeah.
And
for
then later on, if it's valuable, that's great, and Yeah, yeah. It's
But
kind of
it also helps you boost your self-esteem and, keep you going, because people who buy your older works for a lot of money will most likely also buy your newer ones just for the sake of collecting it.
yeah.
So
It's like
I
every
think
preacher
about this
sits
a
there.
lot. You leave something behind and people are going to discover it and appreciate it at some point, and this will only elevate everything else that you're doing. And
Yeah.
to me, the magazine, so I've come to the magazine after experimenting with a lot of stuff from the podcast. I've done a radio station that was running 24/7 on YouTube and Twitch that was broadcasting podcasts from lots of creators that are lesser known. I've also done videos and YouTube stuff, and it always seemed like nothing was really catching on, and I had
Mhm.
to go for a long time before I would get noticed. But right now, I figured out that with the magazine, I can put it all in one package and make sure that nothing of what I created goes to waste, as long as I put it into words and I write it.
Yeah.
So all of the experience that I've gained making videos and doing podcasts, I can put it into a tangible form in a magazine.
Hmm.
And people are going to discover my prior work, and maybe it's the best way for me to promote my own work and make sure that it doesn't go to waste, because with social media and algorithms and all of that stuff, it's very easy to bury content and
Oh
make
yeah.
not get discovered ever,
Yeah.
unless, I don't know, you get on the news with some sort of scandal and people start digging into what you've been up to. Otherwise, yeah, I think that there should be like an objective way to, like a tide to lift all of your boats.
Hmm.
And that's also the reason why I've returned to newsletters. I'm trying to get subscribers to my Bitcoin Takeover newsletter for the simple reason that I realize that social media is so temporary, not just in terms of posts that get buried by the algorithm, but also in terms of censorship and in terms of closing down your account.
Hmm.
In 1 second, all of your work, everything that you've ever discussed with people, all of your connections can be gone just like that because somebody decided that you are offensive.
Hmm.
And the rules are changing all the time, and you never know when they're gonna dig up something that you posted 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and you're drunk and you said something that you're not supposed to, and the new PC police decides to.
I'm really happy that social media didn't exist when I was in high school.
Yeah, like it kind of existed. So we had YouTube, and it was the early days of Facebook, but we did not have these cell phones to post everything. So you had to get to a computer if you wanted to.
Man, what you're saying about the radio station really resonates with me. I used to have a radio station as well. I built the transmitter with the J pole and all that stuff, and and it's like you keep experimenting with these projects, and then like you said, one thing will lift everything else up that you've done in your past, and and maybe this is it. Hopefully, this is it with the magazine. I mean, it's well done. I want to do anything I can to help out and try to bring some eyes to the stuff that you're doing, because it's definitely inspired me as well. So.
Yeah, so right now officially I have no copies left except for the ones from which I saved one small copy, but I have one that's slightly damaged and got returned because the receiver did not pick it up. And I don't want it to sound like that, but I can send it to you. It's slightly folded in one of the corners.
That's quite all right. Well, shoot, I'm at an hour and a half, and I start to hear the kids running around upstairs. So I'm gonna have to make them breakfast and go put on my dad hat for the day. So
Yeah, I enjoy that.
yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I love all your work, and yeah, we'll have to keep in contact, and I'll definitely continue following you. And yeah, thanks again.
Likewise, good luck with your show.
Oh, where can people find you, real quick?
Well, I should not mention social media anymore just because
Okay.
it's so fragile. So bitcointakeover.com, it's Bitcoin-takeover. So you can also abbreviate it as btctkvr.com. And you can contact me there. I have an email, I think, where you can send stuff, or you can write a comment to any article and I'm gonna see it and I'm gonna reply to you most likely. You can also find me on Twitter at THEVLADCOSTEA. But I also own the account BTCTKVR, as in Bitcoin Takeover. So you can contact either of them. Yeah, that's kind of it. You'll find other ways, just like other accounts, but these are the ones that are most commonly used and where you're most likely to get a reply.
Right on. Okay, well, mulțumesc and bună seara. So.
La revedere.
All right. Thank you for making it to the end of this program. If you actually like this content, give a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more, just hit the subscribe button. I'm available on YouTube, Odyssey, and BitChute, and on all the major podcasting platforms in audio version. Spotify specifically. If you would like to follow and leave a review, that would help a lot. I am also available on Twitter at EurekaJohn1. That's EUREKA John, JOHN, and the number 1. My DMs are always open. Feel free to shoot me a message. Thanks again.